The New York Mets have just hit rock bottom. Everything is crumpling, and it came within just 2 outs of displaying nationwide. So stay tuned only on Mets Digest to hear what happened and why fans are appalled after the Cleveland Guardians just swept our Mets. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. We're going to talk about these struggles from the Mets and this series against the Guardians and today's game. But first, we got to talk about some subscribers, and that being the fact that 69.4% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here at Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in, starting it off with the box score. Oh, Carlos Mendoza was already on the screen. Yes, he had a bad game today as the manager. The Mets had a pathetic game, as you can tell, shutout through 8 innings. But it was worse than that. Just one hit today, and that was the lone run that we had in the 9th inning. They were no hit through 8 1/3 innings pitched by Gavin Williams. The last time the Mets went more than 10 innings without a hit, you got to date back to 2004 in a series against the Tigers. Well, the Mets shatter that now. 12 consecutive innings of no-hit baseball from opponents against the New York Mets. It's not even available online to see when the last time that happened was in franchise history. And luckily for the Mets, they had the one run in the 9th inning, and it came from this guy. Juan Soto hit a home run on Gavin Williams' 117th pitch of the game, the tying pitch for the most amount of pitches thrown in a game by a Major League Baseball player this year. It was 117. Williams shattered it with 126. We'll get into Williams' performance, but because Soto hit that home run to dead center, the Mets finally recorded a hit. 43 consecutive outs between Jeff McNeil's base hit to lead off the 4th last night and the Juan Soto home run. Again, stats like this aren't even available online because of how pathetic that is. 43 consecutive outs without recording a hit. That's terrible. Terrible. The one good thing that we can see from this, besides the Mets, of course, hitting rock bottom, there's 2 good things about hitting rock bottom. The first being you cannot go any lower. You have to go higher. You cannot get any worse than what the New York Mets are at right now. And to dive into the positives, Juan Soto obviously has been terrible with guys on base, people in scoring position, and just pressure situations overall. He finally hit a home run in a pressure situation. Now, when you turn to these stats from FanGraphs, it probably won't tell you that today's home run was a high leverage situation or a pressure situation or anything like that. In fact, nobody was on base. Nobody was in scoring position. However, when the pressure was there, when the Mets had their backs against the walls of being no hit, Juan Soto delivered. He hit a home run. So that's a good sign. Hopefully that wakes him up. We'll hear what the skip had to say about Soto in just a little bit. But first, let's turn it over to Gavin Williams' stat line. Obviously, absolutely incredible. 8 2/3, 1 hit. It was just the Soto home run. 1 run, it was earned. 4 walks, which is high. 6 Ks, 126 pitches. That is an MLB season high. Overall, great game. Most pitches thrown in an outing here this year. 117 was the previous record. On the other side for the Mets, David Peterson, he fought his way through. Again, Carlos Mendoza doing Carlos Mendoza things, pulling Peterson early after just 89 pitches. You're down 4-0 at that point. The way this Met offense has looked, you're through the 6th inning. You are now 10 consecutive innings without recording a hit. Why do you think the Mets are going to score 4 runs out of there? Why not throw Peterson, keep him in the game, let him throw longer? I mean, his ERA drops. He's below 3. So overall, I mean, Peterson is just incredible. He is the only Met that can last to the 6th inning. But this is not about the pitching staff. This is really overall about the offense. I've talked about the pitching staff to death and how just they cannot pitch deep into games. They have a great bullpen, but you got to be able to get to the bullpen, and you have to at least make the bullpen be able to throw a couple of innings at most. You can't let them throw the entirety of the game. Anyway, just so many pitching struggles, but we've been over those. What we haven't been over is, of course, Gavin Williams and this no-hitter. He had a good ERA coming into the day, obviously lowered heavily by 8 2/3 of just 1-run baseball, down to a 317 with a 130 whip, pretty high. Obviously gets 8 2/3 pitches added to his innings pitched on the season. So let's quickly take a look at the hitter's box score. As you can tell, Juan Soto, the only guy that got a base hit. A couple of walks drawn, 1 from Cedric Mullins and 3 from Brandon Nimmo, which is a good sign. gets his OPP up, and he's been really, really cold of late. In fact, the Fab 4 has been pathetic since, with the exception of Nimmo, who has a 232 average since the All-Star break. Every single member that is hitting 1 through 3 today, which, of course, the order was flipped around. Go check out my video, my most recent one about Carlos Mendoza, if you haven't already. The 3 guys at the top of that order, Lindor, Soto, Alonso, all under 200 for their batting average since the All-Star break. That is pathetic, and guess what our skip did? I mentioned it last video. I'm not the biggest fan of Mendoza anymore. In fact, I might be hopping on the train to get rid of him. He chuckled his way through the post game, so let's hear what he had to say. Initial reactions to the game and the performance from Gavin Williams. He said you got to give him credit. Obviously, he was really good today, using all of his pitches, but we also know that we're better than that. They know they're better than that. We just couldn't make any adjustments. As good as he was, I feel like he gave us a few pitches to hit, and we missed them. Lindor hits a ball hard that first inning. Soto, I think, hits a ball hard that first inning. But after that, Vientos, I think, was the only one. Like I said, we couldn't make adjustments, and you got to give them credit. But they know they're better. I know they're better. Yeah, great, you're positive, that's fine. But after this, where it seems like it is rock bottom, surely the worst it can get here in 2025, you got to be screaming. You got to do something. I don't know, have a closed door meeting, throw a chair, do something. Show that you have some life, and we'll talk about meetings in just a little bit because he did in fact address it, but Gelbs, he took a shot with his next question, that being Steve Gelbs, of course, of SNY. He said, you've mentioned something similar a lot this year, that they're better. It's going to turn, but now into August, this has been a pretty consistent season-long thing. When you look at the players that you have in that room, is there anything that you're seeing overall where you just say, this is the one big reason why it's just not consistently happening? Well, Mendy responded by saying, it's hard to kind of just pinpoint one thing, but you look at the game today or the past few days, we go in with a game plan and we haven't been able to make adjustments as they make adjustments to us as a whole. As a team, yes, individually you got to make some adjustments, but as a team, you got to be able to recognize how they are attacking us, and we haven't been able to do that. Today was pretty easy. You saw the curveballs below the zone against the lefties, finishing lefties with fastballs at the top. He threw some two seams against our righties, but once you get that first time through, we got to be able to make those adjustments and recognize what he's trying to do to the whole team. Overall, again, this is taught at a young age in baseball. You got to be able to pick up what you're seeing from the pitchers instead of just sitting there spitting up sun seeds and having a good time with your buddies. No, you got to be watching the pitcher. You got to see what the pitcher's tendencies are, where is his arm slot, things like that, and that's where you get those adjustments that Mendoza is talking about. But anyway, to continue with the quote, he said, I feel like not only today, for the past few weeks or so, we haven't been able to do that. Of course, they've been in a terrible rut, really, since June 12th. And good hitting teams are able to make those adjustments. Well, the Mets haven't of late, so there's that question. They're able to say, all right, that's how they're attacking us. We got to do this. We got to flip the script here. That's what I think is the next step for us to be able to recognize that. Well, Carlos, it's not really working. And also, wouldn't that rely on the hitting coaches? More coming on that in just a little bit, as Steve Gelbs continues with another question saying, why do you think you haven't been able to make those adjustments? Well, Mendoza said, those are some of the conversations that we continue to have. I know our coaches are working really hard. They continue to have those discussions with the players, but at the end of the day, we got to go out and do it. I mean, it's more of the same thing every single postgame from Mendoza. Now, here's a quote about the coaches from the pregame in specific. He said, 1 through 9, or whoever's in the lineup, we have to be better. Eric Chavez and I are watching film. Eric Chavez, of course, is one of the Mets hitting coaches in addition to Jeremy Barnes. They're watching film. If you get a good pitch, you hit it hard. After that, it's out of your hands. We all want results. Stay positive. Well, obviously, it didn't work, as here's his reply more on the coaching side of things. He says, it falls on all of us. It falls on me as a manager, but we're in this together. This, of course, is the response to the question, how much does that lack of making adjustments fall on your coaching staff? He said, I'm not going to point fingers here. I know, we got really good players. But if I'm gonna point at myself because I'm the manager and I'm responsible, so I know how hard those guys are working. but it starts with me. All right, fine. Carlos Mendoza, he's being responsible. He wants to take the blame. All right, well, we're still blaming Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes. You did not do well. You can't hit of late. Jeremy Hefner is almost as much to blame on the pitching side of things. Yeah, it's going to be on you, Carlos. That is part of the blame as well. You got to put together a good pitching staff, and a good coaching staff, rather. And if you don't have a good coaching staff, how about you go to David Stearns and say, hey, I need this guy fired. I need a new hitting coach. But no, he's got to protect his guys. It's the same thing every single time with Carlos Mendoza. His big point today was conviction. He says, I think trusting their abilities, trusting their work, their preparation, and going out there and competing. Trust in your plan. When you see guys taking pitches to hit, when you see guys kind of like in between, we're not seeing conviction. So, for me, we just got to go out there with conviction. Stick to your plan, stick to your approach. Yes, you got to make some adjustments, but you need to have the conviction when you're making those adjustments as well, and we got to do it. Now, some other points that he made today, he did a lot of, we're going to get through this, we're a good team, but you've heard it in these quotes. He just keeps saying the same thing. He says, yeah, guys can overthink in that lineup, but they've been here before, so they're good. In fact, funny enough, he talked about good communication between the coaches and players. Obviously, it hasn't worked, as another media member pointed out, hey, that's obviously not working. How come it's not translating? And he replied saying, sometimes it's hard to translate that communication to good play. He said, we're not creating enough traffic. Another good question. How about meetings? Are you guys having any meetings? Maybe closed door meetings? Well, he says there's meetings every day. Well, they're not working, Carlos. You need to change something up. It's not working. Change your routine just a little bit. I don't know what to say anymore. Throw a chair, scream, do something, show some life. He also said, and this is, if anyone's a Jet fan, this is the Robert Saleh special from last season. We're going to go back and look at film. It is so aggravating to hear these words. Let's talk Juan Soto for just a little bit, because he had a play where it went over his head, and Juan Soto being Juan Soto, $51 million, he's sitting there trotting, going to the warning track to pick up the ball, and it ended up being a triple. Yeah, it went over his head, and then he bounced, and then it bounced away from him. So yeah, I have no issues there. So Mendoza doesn't care that Soto's not hustling. He never runs the ball out. Oh well, whatever. You know, real managers, guys from back in the day, they would be screaming at this guy, hey, you're making $51 million. Wake up, hustle. That's the least you can do for this team. But baseball is just a changed game, and to continue with that, he talked more about Soto in terms of did that home run really change his season around, because he hasn't been great offensively all year despite the 26 homers. And Mendy said, I think I said it before the game, the past couple of games, there's some signs there that he's more balanced. He's connected, he's short to the ball, and we know when you see that right there. I said it before the game, that breaking ball first at bat against these guys when he drove it deep to center field, that's what it looks like, and we saw it right there on that last at bat as well. So I think he's getting close. So I guess that's good. As let's hear Juan Soto's reaction overall. He said, I really don't know what's going on, but definitely we have the talent and the guys that are capable to do damage. One day it's going to turn around. Well, it has to turn around quickly. Here is the recent game log. We all know it. 1-8 in their last 9 games, and hey, they're kind of falling out of it in the wild card too. Cincinnati, red hot, 2.5 games out. We mentioned this earlier. It was 3, now it's 2.5. I don't know. They're still 2.5 out in the division. Fine. But this team is really just on a terrible roll. And see that best team in the National League, best team in Major League Baseball, Milwaukee? Yeah, we got a 3-game series coming up this weekend with the Brewers. Stay tuned for that. So go down there in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this team that has just been abysmal of late. There's no other way to put it. The one good sign, I guess, is the last time the Mets were 63-52 at this exact day, 115 games into the season. It was 2015. They ended up winning the pennant that year, went to the World Series, but 2015, the vibes were a lot different around the August 6th mark. You just had the Yoenis Cespedes trade. You just went out and got one of the biggest names on the market. You had the Wilmer game behind you where he cried. The Mets were in a lot more of a role than they are now. It was more, Mets started out shaky and poor and then got better. Trade deadline happened and they exploded from there. Unlike this season where they exploded out of the gate, fell, had a great trade deadline, comes up, and then you fall right back down again. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree with any of the points that I had. Let me know if you think it's time to get rid of Carlos Mendoza, maybe Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes, Jeremy Hefner. Let me know what you think down below. Give me your thoughts. Thank you so much as always for watching, and let's go Mets.